Today we're going to be talking about putting the Android operating system on a Pandaboard. Pandaboard is a ARM-based single board computer capable of running a variety of operating systems, including Ubuntu and Android. And today we're going to be putting Android 4.3 on the Pandaboard. Pandaboard is primarily a development tool. It's really great for Android because it's a device that you can put a variety of different flavors of the Android operating system on. It's unlocked and it's relatively cheap. So it's very nice for doing development. You can find a lot of information about Pandaboard itself on the pandaboard.org website. And there's basically a lot of stuff that you can learn here about Pandaboard itself, about the different equipment that you need to run it, and all kinds of other information. You can also find a lot of information about building and installing the Android operating system on the Android source webpage. Now there's a few things you're going to need for Pandaboard to get started. So let's just go into the resources, accessories and peripherals. Okay, you're going to need, for one thing, a power supply. Basically any 5-volt power supply will do. If you look at the web page, they even show you some places where you can actually get a power source. You're also going to need a serial cable. Basically anything with a serial cable on one end and something that you can plug into your computer on the other end. Probably going to be USB. Now personally, as you can see, I have my Pandaboard mounted with a small enclosure. Now you can get all kinds of fancy, expensive enclosures for Pandaboard. I think there's a really nice one on the web that I saw for like 35 euros or something. But I got this enclosure at Radio Shack for about $6, and I just cut out the necessary parts. You can access the various things, and this works just fine. As I'm going to be accessing the buttons on the board and stuff, I'm just going to be leaving the top off for today. You're also going to need a collection of SD cards. Typically 4 to 8 gigs is considered sufficient. The idea is that you're going to put a variety of different versions of Android on different cards, and then you simply need to plug in the card onto the device, boot it up, and you've got that version of Android to run. Now some cards work better than others. So for example, these cards do not work very well. For reasons which I don't understand, they seem to work, but there's all kinds of weird side effects if you attempt to reset the device, not on a cold start. The reset won't work. You can't get into fast boot. There's other just weird things. So if you're ever having weird problems overall, you might try just changing the type of disk that you're using. Now, these disks, in fact, work pretty good. These are the ones I've been using pretty much for everything at this point. Something else you're going to need is just an ordinary keyboard, mouse, and monitor. Pandaboard has outputs for HDMI or DVI. So you're going to need either an HDMI or a DVI monitor with a cable that goes from the HDMI format to either DVI or HDMI, whichever one you're using. Personally, I don't like to work on a workbench. It kind of ties me down. So instead of using these things when I'm working on stuff myself, I have this nice little small 12-volt HDMI monitor that I use. This is not a touchscreen monitor. Those are about twice as expensive. But this does everything I need, and then for other projects I still have a nice monitor to play with. I also use this small USB keyboard with a built-in touchpad. This works pretty good, but it gets things done. Now you might be tempted to use a nice little Bluetooth keyboard like this. This is a very nice device. It works very well with Android. The problem is that Pandaboard does not work with Bluetooth. I don't know what the deal is. Pandaboard, it has all the Bluetooth hardware, it has all the drivers. When you try to pair the keyboard with the Pandaboard, it detects the Pandaboard. You can go through the whole sequence. It's just as soon as you try to access any data through the Bluetooth, some Bluetooth service on the Pandaboard crashes and nothing works. So just keep in mind that I have never seen any version of Pandaboard Android work with Bluetooth. So unfortunately, you're going to be stuck with the ordinary USB type. Okay, and obviously you're going to need some sort of a Linux machine to do your building and controlling from. This is a relatively underpowered System 76 laptop with Ubuntu 13.04 installed on it. By no means a power horse machine, but it's good enough to get the job done. In theory, you can build the Android OS using Mac OS. The problem is Mac OS has a case-insensitive file system, but there are workarounds for that. But the truth is, you know, why bother earning yourself more trouble? If you're going to be proficient with Android, you pretty much have to bite the bullet and be a proficient user in Linux. If you're going to log into the Pandaboard console and interact with the Linux kernel, it's something that you just have to be able to do. One of the things that makes Pandaboard great is it's perfect for doing demos. Since it already has HDMI output, you can simply plug it into your projector and you're ready to go. Now if you want to display your Pandaboard over like a net meeting or something, one option would be to get a professional HDMI frame grabber, which is easily going to run several $100s, which I wouldn't recommend. A different solution you might consider is, I got one of these HDMI to AV converter devices, so it takes HDMI in and it gets you composite video out. Couple that with one of these EasyCap devices, and basically you're going to go from HDMI to composite video to USB input. Now, there's a whole story behind these EasyCap things. They're manufactured by any number of different Chinese companies. There's at least 4 major varieties with different chipsets, and they all look alike, and it's very hard to tell them apart. If you want to use one of these things, there are other tutorials on how to get them set up. One thing I would recommend is you might want to consider taking a quick peek at this website. You can learn about how to identify different EasyCap devices and get drivers of various types and whatnot. I'm not going to say a whole lot more about that. I will say that one thing that I haven't seen is when you're setting up these things, there's a million different parameters you can play with to try and get the picture as good as possible. One thing I discovered, which I hadn't seen anywhere else, was even though I'm in North America, I discovered that if you set the output of the converter to PAL, the European standard, that seemed to work a whole lot better with my EasyCap device. The picture quality went up dramatically. So something you might want to consider later on in the demo when I'm showing you the Pandaboard screen output. I'll be using the EasyCap so you can see for yourself what the quality is going to be like. It's not great, but it's certainly doable. If you have not yet bought a Pandaboard, I would recommend that you go through the whole build procedure so that you sort of know what you're getting into. So what you do first is go to the Android source page here. Going out to download and building, downloading the source. They describe here how you set up the repo tool. I'm not going to go into the details there since they do a pretty good job. The important thing is to know what branch to check out. Now, if you read through all the stuff here that they have, they do talk about Pandaboard, and they say that you should download the master. That is definitely not correct. Right now, the latest version of Android 4.4 does not have the Pandaboard specific stuff in the download, so it definitely won't work. So to figure out what you do need, let's go to the web interface of the source page here. And then if we search for Panda, this device TI Panda is where all the Pandaboard specific stuff in the Android source tree is. And I don't know why it shows up as being tagged with the master, but it's not. What you really need is this one. So this is the branch that we're going to go against. If we save that, what we're going to do is we're going to use this command, and we're going to use the branch that we just got. Okay, so let's start off with a clean directory to work in. And then let's use the command that we just had. And the branch. And this will initialize the repo client. So now everything is initialized. The only thing we have to do is do the sync. And this is going to take a long time. This is not a go get a cup of coffee. This is like a 2 or 3 hour operation, maybe, depending on your internet speed. So let's just let that cook for a while.